Welcome. I received some excellent questions from you folks, from students. I chose a few to respond to, though they were all excellent, and I've given points to every student who sent me a question, though I won't respond to all of them here. I tried to choose a few that might represent in some way the other questions as well. But please continue to send questions. This coming week we'll be talking about care for community and a lot about power. So I'll be looking forward to your questions about that topic next week. But today, and again, this is just purely optional, but I wanted to talk about forgiveness, the questions and answers that you sent me. So again, to kind of review the way I've set this up in Care for the Other, forgiveness replaces anger and a desire for revenge with agapic love. Remember, agapic love is that unconditional love that we learned about earlier. So forgiveness replaces anger and revenge with agapic love and this invitation for restitution. And I was actually wanted to share with you, I came across this story from Owen Flanagan. Owen Flanagan is a kind of a famous, prominent, modern, contemporary philosopher. And he was talking about a conversation he had in March of 2000 with the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, India. They were talking about destructive emotions and how to overcome them, and they were discussing specifically anger, which for a Buddhist is never a good emotion. And Owen Flanagan said that he posed to the Dalai Lama this thought experiment. He said, imagine that one were to find oneself in a public space, a park, a movie theater, where one realizes that one is seated next to Hitler early in the execution of the genocides that he perpetrated. We, my people, Owen Flanagan says, meaning in our Western tradition, we would think it would be appropriate first to feel moral anger, to be angry and outraged at Hitler, and second, that it would be okay, possibly required, to kill Hitler, supposing you had the means. And then Owen Flanagan asked the Dalai Lama, what would you do? So the Dalai Lama, Owen says, thought about this, considered this for a few minutes, and then the Dalai Lama turned back to Owen and said that yes, one should kill Hitler, because it has stopped being a very bad karmic causal chain. So yes, kill him, but, and here's the interesting part, he said, but don't be angry. Don't be angry. Owen Flanagan says, what could this mean? How did it make sense to think of one human being killing another, being motivated to kill another human being without activating the suite of reactive attitudes such as anger, resentment, and blame? But the Dalai Lama, in his mindset, anti-anger, I guess, is the thought that Hitler is an unfortunate node in the way the world is unfolding. Hitler did not choose to be the evil person he is, so he deserves compassion, not anger. And he must die for reasons of compassion for him and all those who might suffer his awfulness. I just share that story with you, one, because I thought it was kind of funny, and I'm always asked that by students when I talk about forgiveness and caring for the other. But I think I wanted to highlight, again, this notion that anger should never be the motivation for action, but compassion should be, even in that kind of odd situation. So let's take a look at the first question and give it a quick answer. So the question came from a student, and I'll read. After reading some of the comments posted on the online discussion about forgiveness, I started to get a question. Someone stated that you can't forgive someone in a situation where you are not involved. So my question is, at what point are you not involved? When my uncle was murdered, was that a situation I was involved in? Because thinking about it, it was between my uncle and his killer, not me, so why would I be included? Or in another situation where you find out that your friend's boyfriend is cheating on them, and they find out and are extremely hurt. They ask you whether to forgive them or not, Are you involved in that situation where you should forgive them or not? How do you know that what situations and actions you need to forgive and others that you don't? Cool question. And the way I was sort of thinking about that is, in its basic sense, forgiveness is exercising unconditional kindness or agapic love towards someone who has harmed you, replacing the anger or hatred you may feel for them, with empathy and kindness, and letting go of that desire for revenge and punishment, and instead seeking restitution or to restore what was lost by the harmful action. But you might feel anger and hatred and want revenge or the punishment of someone who has harmed someone that you love, like your uncle or a friend. Or maybe you read of some horrific act done to a complete stranger that makes you, angry, and you want the wrongdoer to suffer. In both cases, you are not the victim of the harmful act. It seems insensitive to say you should forgive the wrongdoer since you weren't the one harmed. But it still seems, right? It still seems you should want to let go of the anger and the hatred and the desire for retaliation against the wrongdoer, regardless, right? Since this mindset of anger and retaliation or revenge does nothing to repair the wrong or benefit the victim, whoever they might be, but it only poisons your own life. So it seems, though you only need to forgive harms done to you, but you should always have that spirit of forgiveness, that attitude of forgiveness towards all others, it seems. Anyway, let's go to the next question. There's a phrase used a lot, forgive and forget. Are we truly forgiving a person if we have not forgotten about their crime? For instance, the Sandy Hook video you showed us, she briefly mentions that she occasionally has harsh feelings towards the shooter when reminded of the incident. Does this mean she has truly forgiven him? Great question, because oftentimes we think that to forgive means that we forget. So let's review, what forgiveness is and is not. Typically, hold on a second, drink of water. Typically, what happens when someone harms or offends us is we get angry and we desire, payback, revenge, or retaliation. We want to harm or hurt that offender as they've harmed us. Yet, again, we all know this doesn't make us feel better. Maybe it does for a moment, but it doesn't last, and it doesn't restore whatever was lost in the original bad act. Anger and revenge are always entirely negative and destructive of everyone involved. Anger and revenge never heal, never repair, or restore a person's happiness, a healthy relationship, or even a healthy society. Now imagine if instead of anger and retaliation we chose forgiveness. Again, forgiveness replaces anger, hate, and that demand for revenge with agapic love. Now, in agapic love, wrong actions are still condemned, but wrongdoers are forgiven. You no longer want them punished for punishment's sake or harmed in any way. Instead, you want to benefit them and help restore them to a good place in their life. Agapic love holds the other person accountable. To love someone requires, I think, the wisdom and the courage to help that person face the consequences of their actions, not out of a spirit of punishment, but of a spirit of healing. So the wrongdoer, can learn from their past bad actions to become a new person, a better person. So agapic love not only frees the present from the past by forgiving the wrongdoer, but also by holding the wrongdoer accountable, prepares the present for a better future by looking, to restoring what was lost and helping the wrongdoer to become a better person. Now, nowhere in forgiveness is forgetting the bad action a requirement? I mean, also forgiveness motivated by agapic love, we should remind ourselves, is unlimited and unconditional. So you should forgive everyone, even if they don't ask for it, even if they don't confess it. Again, forgiveness, letting go of this anger and hate and replacing it with love, should be given freely to everyone regardless of their merit. So it's not transactional. So you don't say, I will forgive you if you do X, Y, and Z. Now, having said that, forgiveness also does not require reconciliation or that you maintain or enter into a relationship with the person that you've forgiven, especially if that person refuses to accept accountability for their actions. I mean, sometimes in that case, accountability requires that you end the relationship and cut off further contact with that person. I hope that makes some sense. Let's go to the last question. I put these two together. They're very kind of similar. But my question is not whether or not we should forgive, but how do we forgive? In a dominantly Christian area, many are taught the importance of forgiveness, but I would argue, they say, that we are never taught how to let go of the hurt and anger of being wronged. What are your thoughts? And really closely associated with that is we all keep talking about forgiveness and how we can extend this grace to other people, but how can I become better at forgiving myself? It's so much harder to do. I think the first way I would respond to that is to remind us of what we've been talking about all semester long with graceful presence. It seems to me if we cultivate a graceful presence in our life and in each moment, that we already have this attitude of agapic love and forgiveness, right? I mean, just think of the 7 practices of graceful presence, right? You see there, don't react to your moods in the moment. So don't be reactive with anger or hate. Direct your thoughts with love, compassion, forgiveness. So make sure that your inner voice is not filled with hateful speech. Focus on what you can control, not on what you cannot. You cannot control other people's actions or responses to you, only your own. That's why the unconditionality is so important. Only if you love and forgive unconditionally is your actions in your control. To be conditional gives that control up to the other person. Aspire to the greatness of goodness. Realize that in every moment it's an opportunity to develop your character strength. Esteem and treat everyone as you want to be esteemed and treated. I would imagine that every one of us wants to be forgiven. And so we should also be willing to forgive. Nurture the body through diet, exercise, and sleep. Just focus on being gracefully present to the next 15 minutes. So I think those all kind of help us think about cultivating forgiveness and being able to forgive others. But to get more specific, some thoughts for you to think about on how we might forgive others. One, I think, is just decide that you'll be a forgiving person. So just make that commitment before anyone has harmed you, right? Just from the get-go that you're going to be one of those persons who practices forgiveness. The second thing is to practice empathy, right? Remind yourself, right, that if you knew the story of the other person, right, if you knew their background, their history, and why they were the person that they were and why they acted the way they acted, you would probably be filled with compassion. I just want to read you a quick story that has affected me in that way. And I'll read this to you. Hopefully it won't take too long. It goes, once upon a forgotten morning, in some forgotten room, amidst the refuse of poverty and despair, a 16-year-old girl from Cincinnati, Ohio, gave birth to a little boy without a name. She meant to give him a name, of course, but she hadn't gotten around to it. There was no father to consult. In fact, she wasn't sure who the father was. The hospital nurse came around to fill out the paperwork and asked the mother, whose last name was Maddox, to tell her the name of the child. He ain't got no name, she said. Well, the nurse responded, we have to put something on the birth certificate. "Look, I'm tired," the mother said. "Can I go back to sleep now?" So the nurse returned to her station, picked up a pen, and wrote "no name" on his birth certificate. That's what she wrote on that precious piece of paper, that legal tender that proves we exist, that coveted document stamped with inky little feet that goes into the lockbox and is cherished for all time. That's how his life began, this little boy. He came into the world as No Name Maddox. When his teenage mother remarried, he became No Name Manson. By the time he was 9 or 10, No Name figured out that his mother was a prostitute. Nobody told him this, at least not in so many words, but at night he would lie in his bed and listen to the sounds of his mother entertaining her clients. Sometimes she sounded happy, other times she sounded frightened. So No Name confused the two of them, and he still thinks that fear and happiness are somehow connected. As soon as he was old enough to make it on his own, he disappeared into the underbelly of the world and stayed hidden for a long time. Then, suddenly out of nowhere, he surfaced, this time in the papers on the West Coast. Only now he had a name, one that he had given himself, and the press had passed along to the whole world. Charles Manson, running all over California trying to kill his mother. Now, that is not to excuse Manson or his horrible crimes or behaviors. But again, just to point out that a person's actions flow from their character, and yet a person's character is largely determined by factors outside of their control. For instance, their birth environment, their family, their early childhood experiences. And if we knew the circumstances, that produced the person before us, we would have only love and compassion for that person, though we still must condemn bad actions. But only by loving and forgiving the person can we help forge new circumstances for their lives so they can become a better person, a new person. That's why we also have to learn to forgive ourselves, to, set ourselves free from the past and to let go of our own guilt. Number 3, practice altruism. Do something good for them. Again, this also helps practice forgiveness. If you can do something, no matter how small, that benefits or is good for the person that you are trying to forgive. And then 4, practice forgiveness each day, or by each day by practicing empathy and altruism. I make it a daily habit to practice empathy and altruism. This kind of increases your muscles, your forgiveness muscles, I guess. Practice empathy by, talking to new people. Ask people about their stories, about their backgrounds. Think of someone that you don't like and imagine to yourself what some of their good traits might be. Practice, altruism. Just make it a habit to do random acts of kindness throughout the day. So those are 4 ways to perhaps cultivate a greater ability to forgive others. Now, with ourselves, it's very, very similar, right? Decide that you'll be a self-forgiving person. Practice empathy for yourself. Whenever you've done something that you feel bad about, right? Reflect on why you acted that way. Understand the causes and circumstances of your actions. So practice empathy and understanding for yourself. Practice altruism for yourself. Number 3, right? So don't simply wallow in guilt and regret, but think about what you can learn from the experience, right? Think about why you acted the way that you did and how you could act differently, right? What you've learned from that experience could help you be better in the future. And then 4, practice each night, reviewing what you could have done better that day, and imagine doing it better tomorrow. I think that's a great character exercise as well. Well, in the end, if I can just end with these 2 quotes, there is no love without forgiveness, and there is no forgiveness without love. And Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So I guess it all comes back, right, in a sense, to love, to agapic love. For some reason, whether evolutionary, cultural, or divine, we humans are hardwired to be the happiest and the most fulfilled when we practice unconditional love for others and ourselves. That seems to be the message of the greatest religious teachers and philosophers that I know of. So, why fight it? Why not just go out there today and practice love and forgiveness? Anyway, thank you for listening to this question and answer session. Talk to you later.